no items in regards to public hearing. First item on our agenda is amendments and adoption to our agenda. Councillor Sobel, or pardon me, Deputy Mayor Sobel.
Oh, thank you, Your Worship. No, I have nothing. Thank you.
Councillor Moll?
Nothing, Your Worship.
Nothing, Your Worship.
Nothing, Your Worship. Nothing, Your Worship.
Thank you. The only agenda item that I have to add is one item under council invitations.
Your Worship, I'd move to adopt the agenda as amended.
Any discussion? All in favor? Carried. Previous minutes, adoption of the meeting of March the 5th, regular council meeting. Is there any amendments to the March 5th council minutes?
Your Worship, I would move that we adopt the March 5th, 2014 regular council meeting minutes as presented.
Is there any items for discussion on this? There is one question that I will ask. Under the youth club, it was an item that was brought forward by Councillor Fuel. There was no date put under the Strathmore Youth Club for the Friday night laughs. Should there be a date in there?
I can add that easily, Your Worship. It would be May 30th. Do you need a specific cocktail and?
No.
No, okay.
That's fine. And then there was two minor adjustments under the SA report for me. Were those changed? Yes, they were. Okay, so I won't mention them. Nothing further to discuss in regards to that. Can we have a motion on that, please?
So moved.
Move the minutes as amended. Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor? And carried. And delegation. We have a delegation from the RCMP. Would you like to come forward, please, sir?
Your Worship, Council, Staff Sergeant Riley. Came because I believe Your Worship and Council asked through admin for some information on the Alberta Sheriff's Program, the integrated traffic units. Their mandate is, as best I could find, is the Alberta Traffic Sheriffs work with the RCMP and the integrated traffic units to perform traffic law enforcement duties in addition to education and awareness initiatives. Traffic sheriffs are deployed to reduce high-risk driving and behavior, improve traffic enforcement on our highways, and reduce the incident of injury and fatalities, collisions on our provincial highways. I believe that the questions about whether they could be directed or asked to come in and do regular traffic enforcement in town is the question. On that, I've spoken to Corporal Croft and the sheriffs with regards to that. Their mandate and primary goal is to do the traffic enforcement on our provincial highways, both primary and secondary. And although they do come into town at times, it's only for specific offenses that are very difficult to enforce on the highways. And those are being distracted driving, seatbelts, impaired drivings, and obviously for check stop programs. They usually call the local police service, in this case the RCMP here in Strathmore, to try to do a cooperative operation in conjunction with their members that come in. And we try to get our members out with them at the same time, so there's a bigger visibility in regards to those different traffic operations and enforcement. There's no mechanism that's set up within the Alberta Traffic Sheriffs to be able to contract them or have them come in under a memorandum of understanding to a community. And I believe that part of that reason is because they leave that to the actual police force service in whichever community that is. The difficulties that sometimes arise with the sheriffs is that they have not the same powers as peace officers or police officers, as they're commonly referred to, and that's with regards to drugs, warrants, and impaired drivers. Those are outside their scope of duties, and when they do come across those, they have to call an RCMP officer. That's why they work with, or part of the reason why they work with an integrated traffic unit with sheriffs and RCMP in their integrated traffic units, because they try to have one of the traffic members there that's an RCMP, so they would just use that member from their own unit. But there are times when they're out on different provincial highways in jurisdictions, and the RCMP officer that usually is out there with them isn't, whether it's due to sickness or annual leave. And in that case, they would have to call the police service in that jurisdiction, and in, like our case would be ourselves. That does happen. We've done that a number of times. And we take over that investigation because they're not able to do that. So,
Okay.
any questions?
Questions? Any questions? No? Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay. I was just going to mention there's a traffic initiative that we're going forth with. I have asked for input from our guys and our members with regards to specific wear areas and such. We've got that input. I wanted to put that out to you so that if you got council or your worship has any input, please contact me either through admin or call the office. And I hope to sit down with the admin also to get their input. So,
Thank you very much for your time.
Question here and here as well.
Yeah, through the chair, to Staff Sergeant. Now we have, correct me if I'm wrong, 17 municipal police officers, RCMP officers.
I believe it's 16.
16?
municipal police officers.
Okay. What is the provincial average for per capita?
I haven't looked at the stats per se for that. Probably in the last year or two. The last time I actually did it was when I came to council probably 5 years ago. At that time we were below the average, but there was measures put in place 5 years ago, and I think we've gotten up to fairly close to what the average is. I mean, everywhere is a little different, obviously. And I don't believe, I have no intentions of coming to council probably in the last year or two and asking for increases, just because I don't think that there's a need there. And I don't believe you just come just because you want some. But I believe that we're in where that average is. I can certainly get back to you and let you know what that is. I can research it and get it back to you.
Okay. As it was indicated earlier and at previous meetings, the lack of visibility by the RCMP and the community. I know that was one big complaint, I guess, concern that people had when I was out campaigning for the last election. And the police presence in the community, or the lack thereof, is something that people are concerned about, and we're wondering if there's some way to step up the police presence in the community.
Absolutely. That's always a struggle with us. There's always things that are investigations with regards to paperwork and administrative things that have to be done on the investigations. But obviously that's a big focus of mine and my ops NCO is to get the guys out on the road. There are a number of different types of programs that we try to get into the community to increase that. And we certainly do targeted patrols, certain areas that we know are higher crime rate areas. Certainly concerns are brought forth usually by admin, the administration in the town management meeting that we attend every week. Their concerns, and that sometimes that comes through mayor and council. There's different programs such as bike patrols, foot patrols, bar walk program, and the schools, getting into the schools and such. So those are some of the things we try to do. But
I guess this dates back to, I believe it was December 18th when we first discussed this at the, and when the motion came for the enhanced policing in the community. I did have some questions at the time, and I still do. And one of the questions is, where are these officers going to come from that are going to be doing the enhanced policing in the community?
I hope that we're able to fill most of those enhanced policing shifts with the members from our detachment. I know other communities, Chestermere has done it before, and they had the same program. It seemed very successful over there. I know I spoke to Staff Sergeant Henry, who's the detachment commander there, about it, and he hopes and enjoy having it back. I believe part of that is with Chestermere is they have contracted photo radar and such to do that type of enforcement. It's a lot different, obviously, but the shifts to be filled, I hope to fill mostly from the detachment members that are policing in Strathmore ourselves. I suspect a few will go out to members that are in Chestermere or Gleason that are close by that may also be able to, when we can't fill them with members from Strathmore. But I believe that's part of that community policing. Community policing is a very important role, and it's best done by the police officers that are here.
In an event that
Excuse me.
they would,
Go ahead.
in an event that they would have to go to court for something that they had a ticket or what they had issued during these overtime hours, and it's their duty day on shift. How does that work? Do they like who pays for their court time?
If they're on duty, they'll just be required to attend court, and that just is part of their duty. So the only portion that's built into it is if they're on a day off or on a night shift and they have to come in. And that's built into the program. That's part of what we built into that 5 hours to administer the program. So,
Good, thank you.
Deputy Mayor Sobel?
Thank you, and I think that's a great question that Councillor Rempel brings in regards to visibility, and that's another reason why I'm so happy that we're going into an enhanced policing memorandum of understanding, because that's exactly what this program is going to do. Is it's going to increase the visibility and boots on the road, so to speak, for the RCMP. So as far as I'm concerned, it can't start quick enough, and I understand that we anticipate that now to start April 1st. Is that
yes, I believe so.
Thank you.
And that is exactly it. Those members won't be doing administrative duties or other investigational files. They'll strictly be on traffic patrol on the streets in the town. So,
Any further questions? Will we also get a report, regular report?
Yes.
In regards to the
yes.
success?
I plan on trying to do a 2-month report through the program because we have been authorized for a 6-month, and then a final report at the 6-month period. So, and I hope to get that to you within 2 weeks of the 2 months ending. So,
Okay, super. Councillor Peterson?
With regards to reporting, Staff Sergeant Riley, is it would it be a worthwhile undertaking for the sake of the town, for the sake of the community, to, in your opinion, to know what it costs to police our community in terms of presenting public report? I don't think I have a really good idea on a month-to-month basis of what it costs. I always appreciate the reports that the papers carry in terms of the work that you do. But I'm wondering, we had a discussion at this table, which Councillor Sobel had a lot, really good information about when we talked about enhanced policing. And I think it's good for all of us to know that the work you do comes at a price that we all pay, and when the work isn't done, it comes at a much bigger price.
yeah.
So I think it's worthwhile.
Okay.
But I'd like to hear your opinion on that.
Certainly, I'm more than willing to. I will certainly try to get your input on what that should focus on and
Well,
what you need.
we have
So,
better minds than ours.
absolutely, and I will go through admin and that.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you. Thank you.
No further questions?
I just had one, Your Worship.
Councilor Peel.
Just in regards to Chestermere and having their program run the way that we're going to be doing it, I know Councillor Sobel was a big push behind this. This is the type of program that, in your experience in Chestermere, funds itself as far as through ticketing?
absolutely. Part of that is our management of that, and we'll be very strict with that. And we don't see it costing the town anything. It should pay for itself. That's not the primary goal, obviously. It's partly the visibility and make our community safer through traffic enforcement. But it is definitely a conscious thing that we're aware of and a goal of ours.
That's great news. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
The next item on our agenda, 5.2, is EPCOR 101. I like that. EPCOR services in Strathmore.
Good evening, Your Worship.
Good evening.
We have Craig Monville and Vince Corkery here this evening from NEPCOR to take you through NEPCOR 101 presentation on NEPCOR services within the community. Just fire up the projector and hope that all works.
Good. Thank you, John. Okay.
Thank you, Jesse. So, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, members of the administration, thank you very much for taking the time to allow us to walk you through this. My name is Vince Corkery. I'm the Director of Municipal Operations, so I look after all of our operations in Southern Alberta and BC. So I work with Craig Bonneville here, our Senior Manager, who looks after Southern Alberta with the water and the wastewater operations that we have. So we'll kind of do a little bit of a tag team here to walk you through what we're about and why we're proud of the relationship that we have with the town of Strathmore. So we'll give you an overview of what our company is about. We'll also talk about the work that we do here in Strathmore, our services, some of the upgrades that we've worked with you over the years, also how we support your community, and then also we're here to answer whatever questions you might have. Some of you, I understand, there's a bit of a change with council, so this might be the first time that you're actually talking with us. So we want to make sure that we're here to answer whatever questions you might have. So we basically are a company with two focuses. We have our water side and our electrical side. We used to be in the power generation business, but we're now more in the power distribution, transmission and distribution side. But frankly, in Craig and my area, what we're about is water and wastewater treatment and water distribution. So we look after about 1.5 million people in about 80 communities around Canada and in the Southwest U.S., primarily in BC and Southern Alberta in Canada, and in New Mexico and Arizona in the Southwest U.S. We have about 2,800 staff, and that's, as I mentioned, kind of the wires and the water side are our two operating divisions. So we were formed as a standalone corporation in January of 1996. So it may sound a little bit silly, but we're publicly owned by the city of Edmonton, but we're privately held. So we have a fully independent board of directors, and it helps us when it comes to our governance. It's one of our, we believe is the key to our success, is that we have an independent board of directors. We operate as a commercial entity where we pay taxes, we file with CDAR, which has to do with commercial entities, and we report our financial and operating results on a quarterly basis. So we actually, even though we're, as I said, publicly owned and privately held, our roots are in the municipal business, especially on the water and the wastewater side. So in 1903, we had our first water treatment plant was built in Edmonton, And I actually have seen the record drawings for the first water main that came out of that plant, and it's still in operation. 1903. It's even though it's a wood stave pipe, it's still working. So we're all about adding the value to the assets. So in 1996, EPCOR Utilities was formed. 1999 for us, we did our first commercial operation outside of Edmonton. And in 2000, again, you folks were one of our first agreements. So again, we really appreciate that. 2009, we invested in the Alberta oil sands. So we actually now operate water and wastewater treatment and water distribution and collection systems up there for the oil sands camps. We're also starting to branch out into other things on the process side. Also in 2009, I'm going to put a plug in for kind of my background. I came out of the municipal business. I worked at the Gold Bar wastewater treatment plant in Edmonton for 20 years, actually 20 years to the month. And the last 6 years I was the plant manager. So I'm an engineer by training, but I'm a certified wastewater treatment operator, level 4 operator. So I have kind of sewage flowing in my veins. Maybe not the right analogy. They tease me. Anything that my kind of tagline when I came to EPCOR was, if it smells bad in EPCOR, I usually had something to do with it. So. But anyhow, in 2010, we entered the U.S. water market. We bought a small utility, which was the Chaparral Water Company. And then we expanded that in 2012 to EPCOR Water USA, which what we did there was we purchased a federation of water and wastewater districts and assets there that were owned by Aqua American Water, and or American Water Arizona. That's what it was. And the interesting thing there was, because water is so scarce in the Southwest U.S., kind of like Southern Alberta, developers actually had to go guarantee that they had 100 years worth of water. And consequently, there were a lot of developer-owned utilities. So I think in Arizona alone, there was well over 500 investor-owned utilities, which is a little bit different development than how things developed in Canada. So again, with us here, as you can see, we're very proud of our, our Southern Alberta operations. But I also get a chance, as a matter of fact, tomorrow morning I hop on a plane and I'm out to our Britannia mine site, which is just north of Vancouver. So we have 5 sites currently in BC. We have Britannia Mine, which is treating acid mine drainage. Whistler Olympic Park was set up to deal with the Olympics in 2010. White Rock is an owned utility for us, where we actually own the water system there that we purchased from a private owner back in the early 2000s. At Souk, we put in a wastewater plant and a collection system for the district of Souk, and French Creek is also an owned water system. The rest in Southern Alberta, you can see here with Chestermere just down the road, Okotoks. In the Bow Valley, we have Banff and Canmore, and we're putting in a new system, or actually upgrading the existing system in Kananaskis for the province. That's being done as a public-private partnership. Also, we've done work in Okotoks and in Tabor as well with upgrading their infrastructure. So I'm pretty proud of the work that we've done in Southern Alberta. And then you can see with up around Fort McMurray, there's a number of the plant locations, or the red dots north of Fort McMurray, where the camps are. So for us, what we're able to do is we're able to draw on financial and human resources, as we need it. So for example, in 2013, Craig was in Canmore. We basically had 4 sites that were kind of under siege. We had Okotoks, where we had to fly people in and out to change shifts, but there we had put in some new infrastructure, so they were able to work through the floods without any issue on their water supply side. But Canmore and Banff really were really directly impacted, and so was Kananaskis, because basically the interruption of Highway 1 was a huge impact to those communities. But we were able to, during that time from, I think it was, what was it, Craig? It was the morning of June 20th up until I believe it was July the 4th, we had the Emergency Operations Center in Edmonton, where we were able to commandeer people, material, resources, whatever was necessary to support the flood response efforts. So we're very proud about that. We have experience and expertise in operating big systems and small systems. And I think the thing that we're very proud of that we bring to the table to work with your administration is that we think like long-term operators, because that's our history in Edmonton. We own the system at Edmonton. We own the systems in New Mexico and Arizona. So consequently, when you're an owner, you think in terms of life cycle. Consultants sometimes will come and they're worried about what the capital cost is going to be, and sometimes shorting yourself on the capital side will actually end up impacting you on the operating side in the long run. So we try to take the long term. Also, we have a very strong relationship with our regulators, both our public health regulators on the drinking water side and the environmental regulators. And we have a very solid environmental track record where we have certified operators. And that's one of the other things that we kind of take that risk away from our municipal clients, because oftentimes it's hard these days to get good qualified certified people, but we have a pool that we draw from, so it really helps. Also with that, we're very proud of our safe work approach, and as you can see here, we have samples of a variety of things that we use for our standard operating procedures. But again, our CEO and our executive and everybody through the organization, we preach to our people, and hopefully we walk the walk as well as talk the talk, is that it isn't worth doing if you can't do it safely. Because none of us got up this morning thinking that we were going to come to work, do a good day's work, and go home anything but intact, right? Like if somebody gets stitches or they tweak their back, I take that as kind of a personal insult, that something that we've done as a management team that hasn't been right. We've got to make sure that we keep our people safe. Because in the long run, it's good for everything. With that, with our safe work approach, as you can see here, it's part of our overall health, safety, and environmental management system. So, of course, within a company the size of ours, there's always a management system and a business process for everything. So now I'll turn it over to Craig, and he'll talk about how we've worked with you here in Strathmore.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of council. So, as Vin said, I'm Craig Bible. I'm Senior Manager for Operations in Southern Alberta. I've been in this role for about 5 years and been with EPCOR for almost 14 years, the first 8 of which were up in Edmonton in the water treatment plants. And before I go on, we actually have a new site manager for Strathmore. So in our org structure, each site basically has a manager who takes care of our operations there. And in Strathmore, I just wanted to introduce Davey Robertson here in the first row. New because our previous site manager moved on to another opportunity. Davey's been with EPCOR in our Okotoks operations since 2005 and was with the town of Okotoks for a number of years prior to that as lead hand for the plant. So Davey's a certified level 4 operator in wastewater treatment and level 3 in water treatment. And as I said, has been lead hand with EPCOR out there for 8 years. So excited to have Davey here in Strathmore as our site manager effective April 7th. So as been said, EPCOR has been in Strathmore since 2000. At that time, we signed a 20-year operations and maintenance agreement, which has evolved a little bit over time, obviously. So in 2000 and end of 2010, the water treatment plant was decommissioned and the regional line was put into service. So that resulted in a change. And then, of course, around the same time period, a major upgrade to the wastewater treatment plant occurred. So at that time, we sat down with administration and revised and amended our O&M agreement to include that significant change in scope to our work. So we do take care of the East Calgary Regional Water Main, which includes both the operation of it and the maintenance of the line all the way to the City of Calgary boundary, which is about 50 kilometers. And a recent change with changes in irrigation and what the town's responsible for. Some of the pivots we no longer operate, but we work with Nameka now, and the wastewater treatment plant provides Nameka with effluent during the irrigation season. So what do we actually do here? Our contract is basically broken down into two types of services. One is what we call our fixed price basic work service. So this is a fixed fee paid equally over the year in 12 installments. And what we do for that, that's all of our basic work in terms of operating and maintaining the infrastructure. So we take care of all the labor and staffing, the certification, the regulatory reporting, corrective and preventive maintenance, our vehicles, communication services that we'll talk to a little bit later. That's all covered under this fixed basic work fee. The second part of it is certain costs are by their nature somewhat unpredictable and difficult to plan in a long term. So as we work through these things with administration at the time of the last amendment, because previous to that we didn't have to deal with biosolids, for example, we treat these as what I call here as a flow-through cost. So we administer these programs. So for example, we manage the biosolids, which is kind of the solid stream that's produced at the wastewater treatment plant, and manage the collection of that at the plant and shipping up to a compost facility just north of town here, where this third party then takes it, mixes it with wood products, other materials, and creates a compost product at the end of the day. The other part that is treated as a flow through, as I said, are some of the major repairs. So because they're somewhat unpredictable, we try and obviously prevent them with our preventive maintenance program, but things like water main breaks or major sewer line breaks, after a few happen in the year, the more we take care of the cost of the additional ones carried through to the town. So it's a combination, it's a risk sharing approach we have in this agreement. In addition to the core O&M type services that we provide, we also manage water and wastewater related capital program for the town as well. In terms of the utility side of it, the power and gas for the water and wastewater facilities, the town takes care of those directly. So on the wastewater side, in the time that EPCOR has been here, we're actually on our third completely different technology for the wastewater treatment system. Right now, we have a very sophisticated BNR plant, so biological nutrient removal plant, which replaced the SDR plant, which is sequential batch reaction. So all these technologies here, I know a few of you I think have been to the BNR plant on a previous tour, and be happy to show if you haven't the new plant out there. That was done as a design build with Maple Riders AECOM back in 2010 that we managed that project. And now it's creating an effluent that is in line with any of the top wastewater treatment plants, whether you look at the new Pine Creek wastewater treatment plant in Calgary or the Banff BNR plant. They're producing a very high quality effluent that has little to no impact to the aquatic ecosystem in the Bow River. And because of those upgrades and the extension of the BTO line to the main channel of the Bow, we can now have more flexibility in how we operate that facility as opposed to the restrictions we had before the upgrades. Some of the effluent in the irrigation system season, as I said, is sent into Jamaica for irrigation. And as I said, the dewatered biosolids, which is kind of the end product of the solid stream, is sent to a compost facility just north of town here and converted into a good end use as well. We also operate the wastewater collection system, so we have to get all the sewage to the wastewater treatment plant, of course, and that encompasses 6 pumping stations because Strathmore is reasonably flat and it unfortunately can't all flow downhill to the wastewater treatment plant. With that, we also respond to issues in terms of sewer backups. We go in and we determine whether the backup is an issue with perhaps the plumbing or the service line on the residence property, or whether it's a problem with the main. There's certainly some problem areas in town that we try and keep flushed out and clear of grease and oils and that sort of thing. We try and be proactive in terms of proactively flushing, not just those known problem areas, but all the areas. We also have camera equipment where we can actually drop a camera into the sewer mains and watch on a video screen the condition of it, see if it's leaking, see if water's getting in, see if there's buildup of grease and so on, and react from there. On the water distribution side, there are now 3 reservoirs in town, with the new Wildflower Reservoir, of course, just recently commissioned. Because of the distance from Calgary, we have to add a little bit more chlorine than what the potable water from Calgary provides, just so we ensure we have a proper chlorine residual to all parts of Strathmore. So we run that. We do all our regulatory lab testing. We have a QA lab in Edmonton who sends down, for example, unknown samples to test our operators to make sure our skills are up in terms of our testing. And we do some proactive activities too in terms of leak detection. Unidirectional flushing is similar to the sewer side. We flush the mains to make sure we keep the water turned over and clean out the pipes a little bit, and maintenance inspections on the regional line as well. We also operate certain parts of the stormwater system, not all of it. It's a bit of a division of responsibilities between the town and EPCOR, but we do operate lift stations and outfalls and try and keep the water flowing there. So I thought I'd mention a few highlights from 2013. It started out as quite a busy year, as most of you may remember. Some of you were in council chambers here for the better part of the day helping us out, but there was a break on the regional line right near the construction site of Wildflower Reservoir. And it certainly, if anything, showed that the investment in Wildflower Reservoir was well worth it for its increased storage, as during that event, the town had to call demand management measures, and we had to keep Brentwood Reservoir topped up with the use of water haulers from pretty much every community we could find in this area of Alberta. But at the end of the day, we still had water for firefighting if that did happen to occur during the same time, and managed to get out of it. Now that Wildflower exists, of course, our response to a similar break on the regional line would be quite different, and we'd have much more time to be able to properly address it and repair it without having to go such drastic measures that occurred on that weekend. In 2013, so the water system, in terms of what we're required to do from a regulatory point of view, is the water system is under what's called a code of practice, and there are certain requirements of that, and that the wastewater treatment plant has a specific approval to operate issued from Alberta Environment. And there's a whole gamut of things that we're required to do with that, with monitoring and sampling and so on and so forth. We did have 3 administrative contravention approval. And what that would mean is, for example, if a sample were missed, or perhaps we had a failure in our analytical equipment in the lab, because we do the analysis ourselves, and we would have to report that as a contravention. But we had no exceedances of the quality of the effluent going into the Bow River. They all were well below the requirements of the approval, which is good for sure. On the capital side, so we do manage some of the town's capital program related to some of water and sewer infrastructure. In 2014, there are a few projects, one of which you'll hear later tonight, but a few others, which include a significant upgrade to one of the sanitary lift stations, the addition of a aeration blower at the wastewater treatment plant, because the bugs in the plant need air to grow and do their thing, so you have to upgrade one of the blowers, as well as the Brentwood Reservoir itself. As you may know, it's a partially uncovered or partially above ground reservoir with a concrete roof supported by columns, and those columns have been shown to be deteriorating. The concrete is being eaten away by the harsh environment, so that upgrade is, which will happen later this year, is to repair those columns. Right now there's only temporary repairs in place. In terms of community investment, as been said, we've been in here in Strathmore for 13, 14 years. Most of our employees, many of them have grown up in town, and they're quite proud of the activities and the community themselves. And we build floats to go in the parade on Heritage Days, and the folks at our plant really get a kick out of building a float and towing it with an EPCOR truck and so on. We participate in other activities within the community. We also feel public education is a big part of what we do here. We do have some expertise in this area, and whether it's wise water use or trying to inform residents on what should go down the toilet and what probably should not go down the toilet, we feel that's an important part of our role here. So we can use a number of means, whether it's websites or bill stoppers or pamphlets out in the hallway here to try and keep the system running smoothly. And that's basically it for a presentation. We'd certainly be happy to answer any questions you may have about our history here, what our plans are.
Okay.
What have you. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Sobel.
Thanks. Good evening. Thanks for the presentation, guys. It's very informative. I'm very curious about the public education session of this, or portion of this, of the presentation, and specifically the dome flush. I actually just brought this up a few weeks ago in regards to the baby wipes that are causing problems in the States, and one of the things that people should be flushing down their toilets. But what's in mind for the future, if anything? You know, and I say this with all due respect, I've never seen anything in regards to the Don't Flush campaign,
Right.
and I think that's very important
Yeah.
for constituents to be aware of. Is there anything planned in the future?
Yeah, and actually, so every year what we do is we develop a communication plan and decide what are the priorities areas, and we want to hear from you actually what you feel is a priority area. It's an interesting coincidence. I was just actually at a conference in the Niagara region, and I actually ran into the fellow who has started up a group who is really focusing on establishing standards for what manufacturers can call flushable products. And if you recall last year, there's a bunch of media on this in the Globe and Mail and other papers talking about in, I think it's London, Ontario, you know, it costs this much per year for utilities across Canada to deal with these things. So I actually met this fellow, and they are working with manufacturers to have proper labeling on products, because even a lot of manufacturers, it's not clear what you can go down the drain. So we're actually going to take that information, work with them, and develop different products. We have some materials that we actually have on hand and can roll out very quickly, but it's good to hear that that may be a priority here for sure.
Great.
We can do something.
If I could, just one follow-up on most of those handy wipes or the baby wipes. It's very clearly marked in there. Don't put down the toilet. Don't flush these.
Yeah.
But I appreciate
But
what
it's
you're
not
saying.
consistent
No, I
labeling
agree.
in a lot
I
of
agree.
cases. Essentially, the only thing that should go down.
Thank you.
We'll look forward to seeing your stuff on that. That's a great idea.
Any other questions?
I just had one, Your Worship.
Councilor Field?
With the improvements being made to Lakeshore Boulevard this year, are you guys quite hands-on with our town as far as the road is dug up and the infrastructure is checked out? Are you Zebcorp quite involved with that?
So the town is managing that particular project, but say for isolation of services, things like that, we would be involved from that perspective. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Councilor Peterson?
Thank you for your presentation. I want to refer to page 27 of the presentation.
Sorry, the numbering
Oh,
I have
sorry.
is not the same as the original.
It is our safe work approach.
Okay.
And just specifically to talk about, you mentioned on that piece of the presentation that you have an evaluative system in place. And I was just wondering what role community plays in your evaluative process, if you have a participant-oriented evaluation that you do, and what role a community like Strathmore would play in that evaluation. So when you carry out evaluations of EPCOR, what is the level of community-based participation or the level of municipal government's participation in that process, if any?
So with that, ma'am, what we sometimes often do is we actually go out and do community surveys, but we've primarily focused on the level of service that we provide. And it's also, I think, more understanding from a public health or a public safety point of view. Oftentimes what we find is that the public really doesn't understand that, you know, it's important to have chlorine in the water to keep people from getting sick. So we want to really use that to gauge the level of understanding in the communities that we work. So that's really what that is focused on. When it comes to the safety side, we're more focused on either our staff, like the actual personal safety, we're focused on our staff, or the people that we would work with, like town administration or maybe contractors and developers and things of that nature.
So in a company that you said privately held?
Privately held, yes.
And publicly administered, publicly
owned,
or publicly owned. So there would be an evaluator. So then do you have external evaluators as well as internal evaluators? I guess
Yes,
what I'm
yeah.
looking at is what provides the guidance for due diligence from an external perspective? That's the question I'm really asking.
Yeah, so that would be, the province is our occupational health and safety regulator.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
so we participate in the certificate of recognition program so that we
Yes.
have to make sure that there's external audit. I think it's on,
Yes.
what is it, Craig, a 3-year or maybe a 4-year cycle,
for
something
core
like that.
audit.
So you have external and internal auditors.
That's
then?
right.
Yeah.
And we have a health, safety, and environment management system, which has 21 or 22 different points. The reason why I say that is it's always in a state of being
Right.
reviewed and upgraded.
Which is good, yeah. So you have a formative or a summative process.
Yeah. The other thing too, with our board of governors, we actually have a health, safety, and environment committee. So we have, and I've had to appear at that committee when we've had either very positive results or
Sure.
we've had issues. We have kind of chain of command, kind of through the line staff, the local site manager like Davey, senior manager like Craig to me, and then through our executive to the board. So
Well, that was my second question.
Yeah.
Thank you. Around the internal audit. And then in terms of, so clearly EPCOR, you have a process of corporate responsibility that you
That's right.
that you follow.
Yeah.
And do you have a dollar amount that you attach to that in communities? And if I'm asking you a question that you think is outside the realm of being appropriate, I'm prepared to hear that. But,
ma'am, I've never been asked that. So I really don't know. Like, I guess when it comes right down to it, we value the value of the contract that we have. I've never been asked, if we put a dollar value on the safety side of it. So I'd actually have to think about that. I don't know how to answer your question.
I'm not so concerned about the safety side of it because I think you answered that question really well. Talking more about the social responsibility side, and I hear clearly when you say that you look after 1.5 million people,
Yep.
and we agree with that, and I'm glad that you're here, and the 13,000 people in Strathmore pay for you to look after them.
Mhm.
And so I guess from a corporate social responsibility perspective, then I would want to know what the value of that mutual goodwill is at some point.
Ma'am, I think now that I'm understanding the question, and my wife would tell me, Vince, slow down and listen to what Councillor Peterson is actually asking, is that, and I don't want to sound trite, but that value, that social license is invaluable for us.
Yes.
Because, for a company that is, again, publicly owned, privately held, that's looking to grow, our reputation in Strathmore, Okotoks, in the Bow Valley is very critical. For example, when we purchased the utilities in Arizona and New Mexico, our safety record, our environmental record, and our rate record was entered into the record for the Arizona Corporate Utilities Commission. So they actually had to find out, do these people from Canada that we don't know, can they be trusted? And what was really interesting was we had allowed for, I think it was 2 turns through the regulatory requirement that they would ask us for things, and they were very satisfied with it on 1 turn.
Thank you. And my final question is just to ask if the evaluative process that you follow, that you adhere to, is it publicly available?
The best thing to do, ma'am, it would be our corporate responsibility report, because it's
Yes.
yay thick.
Yeah,
So
on
it
your
is-
website. I've read that. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Thank you.
that's the way that it's.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Any other questions? No? Just a couple quick questions, if I might, and it's not really important. I'm just wondering, how many employees does EPCOR have here in Strathmore?
I'm gonna have to count in my head.
Yeah.
About a dozen or so,
Okay.
right off the top of my head. So our structure is manager. We have 2 lead hands, one who's responsible pretty much exclusively for the wastewater treatment plant, the other for the distribution and collection system, administrator, and operators.
And you were talking about the dewatered biosolids, and they're being shipped to a compost facility. So what you're saying is that product is now being turned into a usable product?
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
The way to look at that, Mr. Mayor, is that I'm a what they call in Edmonton. They always tease me. I'm the recovering sludge guy. But I come from a farm in southern Saskatchewan, and it really is a valuable resource because it can then be turned into it's high in nitrogen, high in phosphorus, which in the aquatic environment is bad, but done right, when it's reintroduced properly into the environment on the agronomic side, it's great for adding tilth and
Getting rid of alkali.
exactly. I used to manage the Nutrigold biosolids program at Edmonton, and I was very proud of it. And my kids will tell you I can talk about it forever.
I grew up in Vine Loss. Empress.
Oh, okay.
And
Yeah.
one other quick question is, you've indicated leak detection. Is that an ongoing situation where you're checking for leaks in regards to the water mains here in town, or is it just if something is brought to your attention?
So both, actually. So it could be a situation where a leak surfaces, and we use the leak detection equipment to pinpoint where that is. Certainly if it's on a service connection and it's surfacing around the CC or in someone's front yard or driveway, it can be hard to tell where it is. But there's also the proactive side of it as well, where in times we may just go around and listen in on hydrants and other assets in the system and try and determine if there are leaks there, and then try and determine their significance and to repair. I would say that Davey brings a lot of that experience to Strathmore, because Okotoks has one of the tightest systems in Alberta because of their challenges with diversion licenses and so on. So they can't afford to have leaks because they don't have a license to do it. So that's an enhancement, if you will.
Another quick question. I can remember a couple of years ago there was a problem in regards to the blower system. That's all been corrected and upgraded?
It's been half corrected.
Going to be.
Okay.
So
that's what I was wondering
So
about.
a bit of the
that part
history of that, yeah. So with the upgrade in 2010, the blowers, the decision was made at the time to use the existing blowers. However, they were kind of almost on their last legs then, and really started to become quite an issue from a process point of view, because the plant needs air. So we approached council last year to get funding to replace one of the blowers, and then a little bit later on this year, we'll be coming to replace the second blower as well, because it was just costing too much to repair them than to do a full swap.
And Mr. Mayor, maybe just supplemental to what Craig is saying, I took over the operation here for Southern Alberta and BC about a year ago. And again, my first love is always the wastewater plant. So when I heard about the blowers, one of the things that I can see is that we're working to, especially the way that the upgrade was done, we're working to maximize the use of the assets right up until the end of their useful life. So think of it in terms of, you had some old toothpaste with the old blowers, and we're squeezing the end of the toothpaste out of the tube for you and trying to get you the new blowers just in time. So it's a cost-effective solution for administration.
Okay, good. Thank you very much for your presentation. We appreciated it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on our agenda is 6.1 bylaw, 1405 land use bylaw, amendment bylaw, and it'll be brought forward by planning and development.
Your worship, I'd like to just give a motion on that.
Yeah, that's all it is. It's the first reading, sorry.
Council give first reading to bylaw 14-05.
Any discussion? No?
No discussion.
All in favor?
Discussion.
Have it.
Then move the council refer bylaw 1405 to the public hearing scheduled for April 2nd, 2014.
All in favor? And carried. No old business is being brought forward. New business is 8.1 estimated project cost approval for F4 capital project for TLC upgrade. Director, Engineering and Operations.
Probably a good idea. Another one that hasn't been introduced. Good evening.
Good evening.
We're back. Craig Bonneville is joining me, as well as Christian from the F4 project management group, to discuss the estimated project cost approval. I'm not sure if everybody can hear me okay. Okay. Excuse me. Basically, as part of the 2014 capital project budget for wastewater, we had brought forward a capital project for 50% of 2 projects. There was a PLC, or programmable logic controller upgrade, that was required, as well as a UPS, or an uninterruptible power supply project. And the thought at the time was to split the 2 projects over 2 years, and so we do parts of both projects, and that would result in a capital project on the PLC side of things for approximately $57,800, and a UPS project for approximately $29,700. After some further consideration and some thoughts on some efficiencies with the project, and I'll have Craig and Christian talk a little more about that in a moment. This evening, what we brought forward is a request to focus more so on the PLC upgrades this year. So our spend over the 2 years, rather than doing 2 projects in 1 year, or 2 projects over 2 years, we would do 1 project this year and the subsequent project next year. But our spend over the 2 years wouldn't change. So rather than splitting it 50-50 over 2 years, we focus on 1 this year and focus on the second one next year. What that does, and I guess from an administrative perspective, we have a capital budget for parts of 2 projects. If we focus on the PLC project this year, our capital budget is a little higher this year than what we currently have in the budget, and a little lower next year, because the bigger project is the PLC project for approximately 100 and I don't have the number written in front of me, 105, I believe it was, or something along those lines. And the UPS project is a little less, and would be just shy of $60,000 for next year. But currently in our budget, we have a combined project budget of $87,500. So it'll be a little more spent this year, a little less next year, but the spend over the 2 years would be ultimately the same, just not split. So basically, I guess there's a recommendation this evening to complete the PLC project with an increase to the capital project budget. So there's an ask this evening of an incremental cost for the capital project budget for the PLC upgrades. And then I've also asked Craig and Christian to be here this evening to go through the estimated project cost for the project on the PLC upgrade and give a little information on that as well.
Good evening, Your Worship and Council. My name is Christian Madsen. I've been with EPCOR since about 1999, and just about 6 months ago, I moved out here back to sunny Alberta from British Columbia, where I've spent the last 12 years or so growing our business out in BC. So I've stepped into the role now as a senior manager of municipal projects, and the primary mandate that I've been tasked with is to deliver these capital programs across the various municipal sites we have in southern Alberta. So looking at this PLC project, a couple key points. I think Jesse covered a lot of the important technical stuff, but just in general terms, the programmable logic controller is the main brain, essentially, of the wastewater treatment plant. So that's what controls the process equipment. It generates the alarms to call out operators if something goes wrong, for example, and helps us to avoid contraventions of our approvals to operate. So this equipment is quite old at this point. It's reaching the end of its useful life. It being a computer, it has a lifespan of 10 to 15 years, but it's getting towards the end, and it's identified as a priority to replace that. So the idea being that now we would be spending this money to put in essentially a hot standby. So we would be putting in equipment to be able to swap out if and when this equipment reaches the end of its life and it does fail, but at the same time be able to use the equipment that is there until it reaches the end of its useful life. So it's a bit of a preventative maintenance program and an end of asset replacement project as well. So when the budget was put in, I think about 6 or 8 months ago, whenever that the budget cycle was done, maybe 5 months ago, we had a budget number, a general scope, but as we've gone through, we've looked at how the actual cost would develop, and we've got the quotes from the contractor. So the quote we got from the main contractor that has done the primary work on the PLC and the computer equipment at the plant for process equipment was Vector. So now that we have this quote, we see that about 75% of this cost is equipment. Okay, so it makes more sense now to do this in 1 year, and it's a lot more difficult to split over 2 years as opposed to the UPS project, which when we were originally thinking the uninterruptible power supply, that's really just batteries. It's easy to kind of buy half the batteries this year and half the batteries next year. Now that we've got a real number, it doesn't make as much sense to do that when we have the lion's share of the cost for this project being equipment. So that's the one main reason that we want to now pull this into this year. And that being said, it's also the higher priority because this equipment is reaching the end of its asset life. The other thing I just wanted to mention was we're also recommending sole sourcing this to Vector. Okay, so there's two main reasons for that. The first being, number one, Vector has a lot of familiarity with the system already. This, as I said, is essentially the brain of the wastewater treatment plant. So think of it like a brain surgeon to a certain extent because it does need to be programmed. You don't want a whole bunch of different fingers in there in the brain of your plant screwing things up or potentially screwing things up. Ideally, we have someone that we know, we trust, they've done the work at the plant, they've been involved, they understand the process, they understand the equipment, they understand the operators and operation requirements. It makes sense to go with them. That being said, the only other component of the project is the programming and the installation. And it only accounts for about $19,000 of the total project cost. So going out in the competitive process for $19,000 on something that's fairly specialized, I don't think makes a heck of a lot of sense. So that's why we recommend just going with Vector. That's basically what I wanted to throw in.
Councillor Walz?
Your worship, to Dr. Stanford. Dr. Stanford, can you enlighten me as to why we didn't upgrade this when we put the wastewater treatment plant in 2010? Why
Sorry, I can't answer. Craig probably can.
Yeah, so it's a similar situation to what I talked about with the blowers, in that we were, at that time, we were trying to keep within the town's budget. It was a $20 million upgrade to the wastewater treatment plant. So we wanted to, as much as possible, reuse existing equipment that was still functioning. So for example, we converted 2 of the existing SBR tanks into bioreactors, reused the blowers, and this was another case where it was still functioning, the PLC, but even in the short time period from 2010 to now 2014, replacement parts for individual components are nearly impossible to find now. And we are afraid that if this were to fail, and if the processor of the PLC were to fail, then we'd be running somewhat blind the wastewater treatment plant. So it's important to know that it's a hot standby. So what that means is this new PLC will be running kind of in parallel and be kind of on idle in the background. And if the current older one fails, it switches automatically and we don't get an interruption in service. But in terms of what the decision made at the time is because it was functioning at the time.
Your worship, my subsequent question would be, are we having current problems with the computer right now?
We have had some failures with it, yeah, and we're managed to scrounge supplies, some from other facilities that we actually operate, but those options are becoming less and less.
Any other questions? Yes.
What is the lifespan of the hot standby?
Of the new
Yes, of the new
piece
one.
of equipment? Yeah. It's probably about 10 years. But again, we look at that. We do evaluate that kind of as part of our PM program all the time and see whether that can be extended. Look at availability of parts. You know, in some cases you can replace components of it, not the whole thing. In this case, we pretty much have to replace the whole.
We need to be sure to build that into future capital planning.
No further questions?
So I guess just one before, and I just want to confirm that the total, the 2 projects, there's no increase in the price of those 2 projects.
Correct.
Thank you.
And in regards to changing our budget with the 18,700, I think it is, that comes out of the MSI. And do we need to make a motion in regards to that being done?
I would move that council amend the 2014 capital budgets for the PLC upgrades and UPS upgrades to consist of a single PLC upgrade project in 2014 for the amount of $105,600 with the additional $18,100 to be funded by additional MSI grant funding.
Discussion? Seeing none? All in favor? Carried.
I would also move the council approve the estimated project cost, EPC for F4, to complete the PLC upgrade project for an amount not to exceed $105,600, and that council approve the mayor and CAO to sign the EPC on behalf of the town.
Any discussion? Seeing none? All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Next item on our agenda is the Strathmore Library Board appointment, and that has been originated by administration. Please.
Your Worship, Council has received a request from the Strathmore Library to appoint Miss Megan Yu to the Strathmore Library Board for a term of 1 year, and administration recommends the appointment.
I would move that council appoint Ms. Megan Yu to the Strathmore Library Board for a term of 1 year.
Any discussion? All in favor? Carried. Any items under administration? Seeing none. And do we have any committee reports? I don't think there are any committee reports this agenda, no? Yes.
I would just like to report on the Strathmore Regional Arts Council that they are continuing to seek support in community for arts locations, and are also actively seeking potential for facility in the future.
Just as a side note, gee, too bad Eckcourt wasn't still here.
Oh, I know how to.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay.
And in addition to that, they are actively planning strategic planning around development, future community-based development, and they are also very close to having their charitable status solidified. So they've been very busy and are working extremely hard on behalf of the community.
Any other comments that we need under committee reports? No? Seeing none? Okay. They're just news reporting. They don't get to ask questions. And questions between councillors. The only item that I would like to make mention of. Go ahead. Do you have something? No. Any questions between councillors?
Yeah.
Deputy Mayor Sobel?
Actually, I have 3 questions for administration tonight. First one, while Jesse's here, has to do with the Kinsman Lake and the rather pungent odor that
That was one of
that is greeting our residents in the area. I appreciate, first of all, that that there was a press release put out today on our webpage and on our Facebook page that dealt with the origin and the reason for the odor. I guess I'm interested in one paragraph on there, and for those who don't know, the press release indicates that there's a very low level of H2S present, and as such and at this time is not a threat to human health. But the second to the last paragraph goes, there is very little that can be done currently other than monitoring. In the event that the H2S concentrations increase to a level that is considered to be of risk, the town and EPCOR will take necessary steps to resolve the issue and protect the public residents in the area. At this time, the situation is considered low risk and more of an inconvenience based on the odor problem. So my questions on that specifically is, what steps are we considering should the issue become dangerous to the residents? Are these levels being monitored, and at what rate? And is the results of the monitoring available to the public?
So just for council's information, maybe a little bit of background as well with respect to the odors that we're experiencing at Center Street, and in particular associated with the stormwater system. These aren't new odors. In 2010, we actually engaged Alberta Health Services because the odors were significantly worse than what they currently are. We actually also cordoned off the area
around the outfall at Center Street. We had barricades put in place to prevent the public from getting within a distance of the outfall at Center Street, and also the manhole covers and the manhole infrastructure that runs between Kinsman and the outfall across Center Street. So this isn't a new problem. It's one that hadn't arisen again in a couple of years. So since 2011, when we installed the aerators that we have in Kinsman Lake, as well as we started some chemical or microorganism treatment that we're doing in Kinsman Lake to try and help with some of the sludge or the material at the bottom of the lake, we thought that this was helping with the situation. What we've determined, or what we expect is happening in the lake, is as the organic matter decays in Kinsman Lake, and I guess one thing I'll qualify with this is that also it's not just Kinsman Lake. Because our storm system is fed from multiple locations, it's everything from Strathmore Lakes to the golf course to Pond 1 in Grey Lake, or Grey Park, Pond 2 in Grey Park, and all the runoff in the areas that comes into there. And then that comes into Kinsman Lake. We focused our attention on Kinsman by putting the aerators into Kinsman Lake to try and put more oxygen into the system. If there's more oxygen in the water, it tends to then help with preventing or I guess limiting the decay in the organic matter in the ponds. And then the H2S that results from the decay in that matter is less. We thought that was what had been happening over the last couple of years, and that may in fact be the case. Unfortunately, this year seems to be a little different, and we somewhat attribute that to the length of time that the lakes and ponds have been under an ice cover. Things have frozen up a little earlier this year. We had our first snowstorm and freeze up, I think it was mid-October, and the pond was frozen late October or early November, as I recall, which was a little earlier than we've seen in the last few years. And the best time to put oxygen into the water is when it's cool. So we've been leaving our aerators in the pond longer, and this year we weren't able to do that because of the cold weather that hit us a little earlier. So we missed a little more oxygen, or putting a little more oxygen into the pond at Kinsman, and that could be contributing to some of that, along with a combination of then having a longer ice cap. We're not 100% sure on exactly why we're experiencing it worse this year than it's been in the last 2 years, but it's also not a new problem, and not one that's unique to Strathmore. The City of Calgary is experiencing the same thing on a number of their storm ponds. It's been on the news in Mackenzie Lake and other areas, and it seems to be a regular occurrence with storm ponds, in that the water becomes stagnant. If the oxygen isn't high, the decaying matter settles into the base of the lake, and then when you get the runoff in the spring, that mixes the decaying matter, brings the H2S to the surface, and then as it outfalls, brings it out to the environment and localizes it at that point of outfall, more or less. So that's really what we're seeing at Kinsman. Unfortunately, after a couple of years thinking that we'd taken some decent strides in making that less of an issue, this year's been a lot more of a challenge. That said, we've had the fire department monitoring it, EPCOR have been monitoring it, as well as ourselves, mostly based on some knowledge or some history. I was involved in the work in 2009, 2010 with Alberta Health Services. I recall how pungent that odor was and how bad it was. This isn't that, and we've had the fire department take the H2S meters out. They've sampled the air quality immediately adjacent to the outfall, which is where the main source of that is. They've also sampled around Kinsman Lake and at the manhole that the overflow is for Kinsman, and there's no health issues with the levels that are being read. In fact, they didn't even register on the meter. So the human nose has a very sensitive taste for H2S odors, that rotten egg smell that is coming out of there, and it isn't being picked up on the H2S meter, and that's as early as this evening, but also previously, and there's no human health issue based on the current readings, not even registering on the meters that the fire department have taken samples with. Those, if we can make those readings and those measures available to the public, we haven't at this point, but we're planning to also continue to monitor the area and the outfall itself to ensure that that's the case. In our 2009 or 2010 issue, it never got to a point in a ppm or parts per million situation where it was of any health concern. It was more of a proactive trying to keep people out of for their own safety. It was kind of into that headache. There's different thresholds obviously with H2S, but and also with carbon monoxide, but both have been monitored by the fire department and no issues. And the fire department also isn't recommending any kind of cordoning or blocking off of the area. At this point, as mentioned in the release today, it really is more of an aesthetic issue based on the odor. And like I mentioned, there's no health concern that we've been able to identify as a result of the testing and monitoring that we've been doing.
Well, I would certainly appreciate. I think it would be a good idea to quote the figures and the results, if that's possible. Do that on our Facebook page and our website page. And
sure.
Could you make that a motion, Councillor Silva?
I don't. I think I would just leave that to direction. To direction, and I think that we'll leave that in the hands of administration. I don't feel it's necessary. If someone else wishes to, they certainly can.
Is there a question?
I have a question.
Okay. I think
Yep,
Councillor Walls
no
first.
problem.
Your Worship, to our Director, what steps are we taking now to mitigate this from future occurrences?
Well, we have a number of different, I'll say that our initiatives are somewhat longer term than shorter term. Putting the oxygen into the water with the aerators has always been somewhat of a long-term plan to continue that, but also to, over time, and in addition with the treatment of the microorganism material that we're putting in to try to reduce the sludge that we have in the storm pond, focused on Kinsman, that's somewhat of a long-term initiative. We're also working with West Creek. Storm Pond 2 and Pond 1 are very significant contributors of stormwater to the system. All of our attention to this point, I guess, reactively has been focused on Kinsman. But we have a project that we're also starting this year and working with West Creek as the development happens with West Creek to improve Pond 2 from a water quality standpoint and from a functionality standpoint, as well as Pond 1. So putting in some biologs and increasing the treatment, the natural treatment within the storm ponds of Pond 1 and Pond 2. And then that's timed with the development of West Creek's development, but also working with Olds College and Alberta Environment to improve the quality of the stormwater in that area. I'd say those are kind of our two major long-term initiatives. We've also got, we've put some calls into the other municipalities that have experienced this to see what other, I guess, initiatives they've taken on. We haven't yet received information back, but we do have calls into other municipalities, including the City of Calgary, to see what their actions were in Mackenzie Town and in other areas in the city. So environment, there's other ponds that have been dredged. They've decided in some cases to dredge ponds and lakes. That's something we will look into to see if that would be something that would be of benefit to us, draining and dredging Kinsman Lake. We do have that in our capital plan. There's been some discussion around whether our sludge level is that bad that it needs to be dredged. That would require some surveys and things along those lines to determine the requirement for that. We still maintain or still have a lot of organic matter in our stormwater, independent of that sludge. So, it remains to be seen as to whether or not the existing sludge is the main cause of that, but something that we could look into and plan to look into a little more. I'd say those are the major, types of initiatives that we have to date. And in some cases, it's a reality of storm ponds. The way they function, they're designed to trap water. And when they trap water and hold it, and there's organic breakdown in the material, they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, but they're also part of that is sometimes an odor because of the time and the lack of oxygen and things along those lines that contribute to what we're experiencing at Center Street.
Thank you.
Councillor Peterson first.
Thank you, Your Worship. Jesse, with regards to reporting, and I'm very appreciative of Councillor Sobel's comments with regards to this. So it's been a long time since I taught chemistry, but if I remember correctly, with H2S and parts per million, one part per million, you can sense it. At 30 parts per million, you can enter into olfactory fatigue. At 100 parts per million, human beings lose their olfactory sense and it becomes highly dangerous. And at 30 parts per million over a period of days, people can also suffer that same olfactory fatigue, and the levels of H2S can become dangerous. That's my understanding. If I'm wrong, you can point it out. But so what is it at? That's what I want to know.
I don't have the exact readings with me this evening. I guess the information I've received from the fire department
It's not registering.
is that it's not registering
Okay.
on the meters that are used to sense H2S before entering confined space. I think our equipment is calibrated and is maintained accordingly, and at this time it's in essence at the source. It's not registering an H2S or a carbon monoxide level. Period, let alone one of concern or of rising concern, is the information I received from our fire department. So as a result, that's kind of where we're at with that. We'll continue to monitor it, and the fire chief has indicated that they have the readings available, and if needed, and they can be reported, and I'll, as direction from council, I'll make sure that that's the case. But I don't know that there's anything to report.
Maybe not.
Based on not having registered.
And is there any sense in bringing Alberta Health Services in?
Not at this time. No. In 2010, at least that's my perception of this situation. In 2010, when it was originally significantly worse than this, we were registering H2S levels that were of concern within, I believe it was 10 meters of the outfall. Those were dissipating before they got outside of 25 meters, just going from memory. So even then they were dissipating, and there were samples taken at the residences nearby that demonstrated that the H2S levels at the residences weren't of concern by the time it reached the area that the residences were in. We put communication out to basically inform the public that prolonged exposure near the outfall was not recommended. And I believe at that time, well, I know that we did cordon off the manhole cover so that the public weren't able to get within an area, and where the outfall is off the edge of the roadway, by the time it got up to the sidewalk, it wasn't of concern at that point. So it was, at that time, there wasn't any permanent, I guess, ability for people to be within that area of concern. And that was when we decided to engage Alberta Health Services, was because there were readings that were of concern, but we also then demonstrated to Alberta Health Services that they were dissipating fast enough that it wasn't of prolonged exposure concern to the residents that were in the area. So without having a reading of any...
not getting a reading.
Not getting a reading, I'd say at this point there's no concern that we would need to bring Alberta Health Services in for that, but we'll continue to monitor that, and if something...
And we monitor it daily, right?
Well, we've been going based on more so aesthetics. Just a recollection, I mean, I've been driving by there. I've walked down to the outfall, I believe at least five times on myself, stuck my head into the grate, which may or may not be the right thing to do.
We wish you would.
But at least for my own satisfaction, to ensure that there's not an issue. I know what it was in 2009, and the fire department will collaborate that. It was significantly worse in 2010. Excuse me, I keep mixing up the years, but I believe it was 2010, previously to what we're experiencing today. And those readings that we've had with the fire department echo that. So
I appreciate it.
It is at this point, it seems to be more of an aesthetic issue, and some of that is the sensitivity of us humans, but it's also it's reassuring to know that we're not getting readings of any concern anywhere near that area, but something we're also monitoring and going to continue to monitor.
Thank you.
Councilor Rippel?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through the chair to Justin. How far could we feasibly pump, if we were to pipe that, sorry, not pump, pipe that, how far could we pipe it to where it would maybe not be quite as offensive, the odor quite as offensive to the nearby residents?
That's a good question.
Or is it feasible to pipe that further south? And how much further south could we pipe it and have the outfall at a further point to the south?
With the design of the stormwater system, Pond 4 is adjacent to the Days Inn, and that's a sedimentation forebay for stormwater coming in off the ranch, as well as for the general system itself, as all our stormwater flows through Pond 4. So without bypassing Pond 4 completely, we'd have a second outfall that would happen at Archie Kleiber Trail if we were to pipe it, say, between the existing outfall and Archie Kleiber Trail. If we were to continue using that forebay at Pond 4, we would have to have an outfall at Pond 4, which would then expose, likely bring that H2S back to the surface. If we were to completely redesign our storm system and pipe everything with, if I were to hazard a guess, I would say probably 1,800 mil concrete pipe between Center Street and Pond 6 to get it away from an area where it may be a nuisance. Because our existing outfall from basically the east side of town is about, I believe it's an 1,100 pipe. And our, our Kinsman outfall is, I believe, a 300 or 400 pipe as well, if not bigger.
So Pond 6 would take us to about the wastewater treatment plant in that vicinity?
Correct, yeah, but we'd have to make upgrades to Pond 6 to replace the sedimentation forebay that we have at Pond 5, as well as the wetland treatment that we have at Pond 4 and Pond 5. So we'd have a major infrastructure install of pipe to go. We'd have to then also install an additional culvert under the highway, as the one that's there wouldn't be sufficiently sized for a pipe.
Okay. So now, where the outfall presently is, where does the water go from there?
Where the outfall presently is, it follows the creek through that area east of Center Street, and then goes under Archie Kleiber Trail into Pond 4 next to the Days Inn.
So somewhere, if it's flowing, it must come out somewhere further south. Somewhere.
Yeah, and then it continues from Pond 4 to Pond 5.
So
and then
theoretically, if we piped it to Pond 4, then we would get rid of that smell in the downtown area.
Not necessarily. No. With a south wind, that would only take it to Archie Kleiber Trail, and then it would.
But from there, it
could blow
is
back.
Is there water flowing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, there would be into Pond 4, because it would have to spill into Pond 4. It would just depend on the design of a potential outfall into Pond 4. I guess an outfall into Pond 4 could theoretically be beneath water surface potentially as well.
So are you saying it flows into Pond 4 now, or it doesn't flow into Pond 4?
It does, via the creek. Yeah.
And you can smell it there.
Okay, thanks.
Deputy Mayor
That's
Sobel?
it. Thank you. I'll go on to my, thank you, Jesse.
Okay.
I'll go on to my second question, and that's in regards to the sound system at the Civic Center. About a year ago or so, previous council approved some monies to be spent on upgrading the sound system in the Civic Center, and I guess my question is, what's our status on that?
At that particular time, we also approved about $30,000 to upgrade the family center, and it's turned out well. I've had no complaints about that. The Civic Center, we budgeted about $5,000 to do it. Our IT person had 2 professional sound system companies come out from Calgary to evaluate the sound system. Both of them left and reported that the sound system is good in the Civic Center. Now, we've all had lots of complaints about it, and I sure have. But basically what our IT person is saying is that it's the way people are running and operating the unit. And I guess I'll use Remembrance Day. The sound was really horrible. And they got a hold of Dan, had Dan come down, but he couldn't get in to adjust it because of where it was located. So basically what he is saying is, if there's major events, if we let him know ahead of time, he'll go down, he will adjust it, and he said the sound is very good in the center. Now the Lions Club, for example, usually use their own system, and it works really well.
Well, number of things. First off, I think it's a sad comment that an organization wanting to use our facility has to bring their own system in because ours doesn't work. Second of all, if the situation is that we need somebody to go down there and set this up, then there's something wrong with our system. I've been in Strathmore for just over 10 years, and I have never, on any occasion, ever heard an adequate sound system coming out of our building. Never. And Remembrance Day was, to be quite frank, was an absolute embarrassment.
It was.
So there's something wrong with that system. Either we have to make it usable, user-friendly, with improvements to the way it's set up. And I'm not sure who these fellas were. I'd love to see the reports that if these guys presented it, because I know I could probably find a couple thousand people who disagree with their comments.
Yeah, we probably could.
You know, I want that sound system to be usable and used by the people renting that building. That's my desire.
Okay, we'll get together with Dan again. We did several times today already, and maybe we need to hire or bring out, not hire, but bring out another real specialty firm and see what they say, what can be done, what needs to be adjusted, or whatever. Because like I was saying, in the family center, it costs $30,000 to upgrade it.
Councilor Walz?
Your Worship to Dr. Stanford, where are you at with getting Fred Rappel in to walk through on how to set that system up? Because I know Fred knows how to work that system, and when Fred gets it working, it works very, very well. Until the Lions bought our own, we were using the civic centers, and we were having no troubles with it. Where are you at with getting Fred in there to talk about the policy, the procedures on setting that up?
Okay, we could get Fred to meet with Dan, and Dan knows how as well. Maybe they can write up, you turn this one here and this, whatever. I don't know. It shouldn't be that hard.
It shouldn't be.
Councilor Field.
Yeah, I just had a question, and I don't know if this has been done, but when the sound system is being tested, is it being tested in an empty civic center? Because when we ran the youth club New Year's Eve gala in a crowded room, it was not very good either. Very difficult to distinguish what people were saying. So, I mean, I'm just wondering about the testing situation that they're using to see if it's a working system. Maybe that's part of it as well.
Could be. We'll follow up again on it.
Councilor Peterson?
That was
Okay.
Okay, and lastly, for some time now, I've been pursuing the hope that we can get online registration at our swimming pool. And I'd wonder if administration, and I've been told that administration has been working on this concept. Can you update council on where we're
Yes,
sitting
I
with this?
can. You know, it's interesting, as the town has grown, a lot more people are using the swimming pool, and a lot more people want to have lessons for their kids. And so people have been going in on registration day, say 4 in the morning, lining up so they can make sure they can get registered. Now, to answer the particular question, we found out today that it should be set up and operational by June the 1st. There were people in this morning talking about how it would be set up and so on. The cost for doing that, which we're planning on doing, is $12,000 to $15,000 to set that program up. One of the things, even though once we get it set up, that will help, but the real big problem is there's not enough time for swimming lessons. And we need to set more time, but the problem is after school is when the parents want their kids to take swimming lessons, and all that time is pretty well tied up, which is making it really awkward. So that's one of the issues as well. So anyway, they're telling us June the 1st should be ready.
And I apologize, but has that been a budget item? The upgrade to the I can't remember that coming through budget.
For the 12 to 15,000?
Exactly.
I'll have to check. I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't think
I
it
don't
is.
think it was put on the fall budget.
Pardon me?
I don't believe it was brought forward in the fall budget
No, I don't
workshop
believe
that
so.
we had.
But it's something that, if it's not, we'll bring it, but it needs to be done.
Well, thank you. That's all I have, Your Worship.
Thank you. Any other items?
Your Worship, I do.
Councillor Walls?
Thank you, Your Worship. United Way is currently looking for members, so maybe we can get the media to help us get a little message out there that we're currently looking for members. Also, our community grant program packages are out, and please see the Town of Strathmore website or visit FCSS office to actually get those packages. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, they're due on the 28th at day's end, right? By noon. So if you could please get those in. Thank you.
Councillor Rempel.
Yeah, through the chair to administration, even though we did review the rates for the family center and for the aquatic center, in light of the disastrous amount of money that we're losing, I think it's to the tune of about $2 million a year.
Yes.
At those two facilities.
The three.
Three facilities.
The three facilities.
I really believe that we need to re-examine our rates schedules again and get them in line with other communities and relieve our taxpayers of some of the burden that they're faced with every year. So I would request that the administration bring that policy back to council at the earliest convenience, and that we review those rates again, because we can't afford to lose that much money every year on those facilities, and not be charging as much as other communities are charging their people for using their facilities.
Your Worship, just point of order. I don't believe this is an issue that's either old business or new business, whichever it would be. But you know, I would happily entertain a discussion in this regard at the spring workshop. But if we're going to have it, a request for it to be brought back, that'll have to be in a motion, and it'll have to be a vote.
Yeah. Councillor Rempel, would you allow that to be brought forward as a discussion during a spring workshop?
Yes, I had asked for it to be on this agenda, but apparently it somehow didn't get placed on the agenda, and so I will concur to that.
To be put on spring workshop. Okay, thank you. Councillor Peterson?
I just had a question about and I'm not even sure you can answer it, but in our last minutes, Councillor Walls and I talked about having the library put onto a future agenda. Some issues that we discussed in our last meeting. So I'm just wondering if that can happen for our next meeting in early April.
Okay.
There's
yeah,
reference to
we
it,
can
there's
arrange.
reference to it in the minutes, so.
Okay.
yeah. That's all I have, Your Worship.
Thank you. Any other items? And I just have one item, basically to council. It was about a month ago I had mentioned that I had not signed bylaw 13-1. Shortly after that, administration came to me and reassured me in regards to bylaw 13-1, and I did sign it. Since that point in time, I talked with Reynolds, Mirth, Richards, and Farmer on Friday because I attended a seminar. And they recommend next year we take that bylaw and break it into two. So just to bring you up to date in regards to that bylaw.
For the sake of the minutes and the public, you might want to say what it is.
Bylaw 13-1, I'm sure it's 13-1, is the bylaw in regards to supplemental assessment. Next item on our agenda is questions between, or pardon me, yes, council invitations. Do we have any council?
You have one.
I have one. No? No other council. I do have one council invitation. Colin Lennox, Associate Principal for Carruthers Memorial Junior High, came in to see me today. And on March the 26th, they are holding their 28th annual spaghetti supper. This is a spaghetti supper that was started by Bev Upshaw to assist the students with their trips
To Eastern Canada.
to Eastern Canada.
Central Canada, if you want to be precise.
Okay, Central Canada. And it has been quite a success. The money that they raise from this isn't to pay for the students themselves, because the students pay for themselves. It's just for supplemental incidental costs that do arise from this trip. And Colin Lennox asked for a member of council to attend. There's 110 students and chaperones and teachers that go to this. When they hold their spaghetti supper, there's about 900 people that attend the spaghetti supper. And at that point in time, the Strathmore has likely the largest restaurant in Canada, just as a point of interest. This year they're going to be going to Eastern Canada. They're going to Hamilton, Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal, Quebec City. And when they go to Montreal, for most of the students, it's going to be the first time that they ever ride on a train. So it'll be an exciting time
Or an
for them.
airplane.
Or an airplane, yeah, in a lot of cases, yes. Colin Lennox asked if somebody from council could represent the town and bring greetings. Unfortunately, I am unable to attend, so I have 2 tickets to a council member that is willing to attend.
I would love to go.
Do we have anybody else? That's okay? That's good. Okay. Thank you very much.
The 26th was a library meeting.
We can both go to the spaghetti supper and then go to the library meeting council wants.
Your worship, as much as I'd love to, I'll be at a Wheatland Housing convention that night. So,
thank you very much. That's the only council.
Probably one item I should review briefly. We've been waiting to get the appraisal on the pivot fields, and the appraisal is almost completed. It's way more work than any of us ever thought, because Pat keeps getting back to us, need more information. Some of the things we don't think about is, okay, are there any right-of-ways through there? What about in Canada's plants out there, their pumping areas? How long are those leases on for? Is there a lease with the cart company from Calgary? If there's a lease, there's not as of right now, but if there was, she wanted to know how much it was, what it was for, and how big of an area, and goes on and on and on. How close can you build to our wastewater treatment plant and the lagoons? 300 meters, but there's all kinds of questions I had to answer for her so that she could keep going on it, because it's a lot of work. Thank you.
How close are we getting, do you think?
Probably next week.
So just a quick question in regards to the additional information she's received. We do have a fixed price in regards to the appraisal?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
worship, I move to adjourn. Unless there's something else.
All in favor? Carried.